Hello, this is Donnie Smith, and this is part 3 rust repair. First video showed you how to cut the metal out, cut it so that you are going to be welding into good metal. You don't want to cut just right above the weld or the rust because the metal may still be rusted or thin in that area, so we assure that we are going to be welding to good metal. Video 2 showed you how to fabricate a piece so that you can if you don't have a patch panel that you bought pre-made, you can use some basic tools to make fabricate a piece. And in this video I'm going to show you how to weld it in the method I'm going to use. So if you remember in the last video, the critical point is all the curves and body lines. You want to make sure that they match up. We got that to match up and we taped it. You don't have to use tape. You can use tape or magnets or anything to hold it in place to get a couple of tacks on there. And as you're doing this, each tack you make, you want to make sure that the curves and body lines still match up, because if you get a lot of tack welds on there and then you realize that your body line does not match up, you're going to have to take all that apart, because if your body line's off, that's going to be very noticeable. So I'm putting some tacks at the top, and as I'm doing this, I may have to push the patch in or out a little bit to make sure that it's level with the surface that I'm welding. In other words, so the existing metal that's on the vehicle, that it's flat and surface with the metal the patch that I'm welding. So you may have to use a screwdriver to pry it up or down as you go. But I'm going to go through and I'm going to be putting these tacks in, and again I'm going to make sure that it's lining up. And you can see here, and sometimes you may have to, after you get it tacked, you may have to trim it a little bit. I'm just grinding that edge to make sure that it fits good. Whenever you're doing a butt weld, you don't want it to fit too tight. You want just a little bit of gap there so you can get proper penetration. By allowing the root gap to be there, the weld can penetrate more through both pieces of the metal. And also I wanted to mention that underneath this weld, before we put this on, we did apply weld through primer so that anywhere you're welding is going to be protected for corrosion. So we put the weld through primer, we aligned it up, we're putting these tacks on, and we're making sure that everything's lined up as we go. And remember, we may have to push in or out before every tack is made until we have enough tacks to hold it in place. You can see here I got the top, and he's pushing in right there so that it's a level surface when I make this next tack. You can see that it's being tacked right there. And again, you want to let this metal cool. You don't want to overheat it. You do kind of have to go on order in this step, because if you are out too far on the bottom and you didn't go from top to bottom or whatever, you're not going to be able to push that metal in. So we got to kind of go in order. But by doing this, the welds are kind of closer to each other, the tacks are. So we may have to wait a little bit in between. I'm also hammering each tack that I make. I'll hammer it because the metal's still hot, and that'll help flatten that weld out a little bit, inset it a little bit so we don't over grind. And another thing when grinding, you can over grind or overheat the metal when grinding and warp the metal by grinding it as well. So the least amount of grinding you have to do, the better. And by hammering it, that's one technique to help you achieve that. And you can see as I'm going down, I'm pushing it in, or may have to pull it out, just making sure that's level, make sure the body lines and the curves still match all the way down. And here you'll see on the edge, it looks like it's just sticking out about ½ an inch, which it is. And I'm going to, after we get that in place and tacked on real good, I'll fold that edge over so it looks like the original flange going down. Now you'll notice there is a couple slits where the curves are at to help it fold over easier. And I've also on the back side with the cutoff wheel, I put a little slit in it, or not a slit, but I put a little grind mark exactly where that's going to fold at to help it fold over a lot easier. Just kind of going through the process, putting a tack, hammering it, making sure it never gets too hot, making sure it all aligns. We're going to do this all the way down. Now you see at the bottom, I needed to pry it just a little bit, so I got a screwdriver and moved the panel in or out wherever it needed to go. You know, you can push in with a hammer and do the tack. We're getting close to the bottom. Now I'm on the bottom, and I am tapping on the bottom to make sure that it, you know, lines up with the surface it's being welded to. Now we've went all the way around. This is tacked. It's in place. It's not going to move at this point. You're not going to be able to move it in or out. So it's in place. And now I'm going to start, you know, at the bottom, and I'm going to work that flange over by hammer and dolly to bend it over so that it looks like the original flange. Now you can see that we had it tacked on, and now we have the thing completely welded. And what we did is, once it's in place, you can kind of jump around with your welds a little bit, do some skip welding. For example, you know, you may weld in the front, then move to the back, and then you can keep your welds far apart to keep it from overheating and warping. You may even have to stop every once in a while and let it cool. But you don't want to ever try to accelerate the cooling process. Always let it cool naturally. If you try to cool it with you know, compressed air, or if you try to cool it with water or anything like that to speed up the process, you're going to shrink the metal, and it's going to cause you a lot of extra problems. So always let it cool naturally, but never allow it to get too hot. So basically what we did is we just stitch welded that, you know, all with smaller welds until it finally made the complete weld. Now what we'll have to do is we'll have to grind that weld. And remember, with each weld that I did, I tapped it in just a little bit to help flatten that weld to eliminate the amount of grinding I have to do. Now when I go to grinding, I'm going to skip around with that too. You know, I'm not just going to grind one spot until it's level, or that will overheat and warp the metal as well. So I'm going to keep the grinder moving, get the bead good and level, where we can apply some fiberglass. Anytime you do welding, you need to apply some fiberglass filler. This helps seal the weld, prevent corrosion from occurring again. If you just try to put body filler over that weld, chances are, you know, body filler absorbs moisture, and there's a chance of moisture getting behind that and causing the same problem over again, you know, having rust. So it's always important to use a fiberglass, or there's also another one like all metal, an aluminum filler. One of those two needs to be used first. Just enough to go over the weld, rough it out with 36 grit or whatever to get it off as fast as possible, because fiberglass is harder to sand. Another thing about fiberglass, be sure that you wear a respirator. This stuff is not healthy for you to breathe, and if it gets on your skin, it really irritates some people, so make sure that you have gloves, and you know, you may want to have like a disposable paint suit or something to keep the fiberglass from getting on you. Once that's sanded, you can put the regular body filler on top of that to do your final shaping, because body filler is easier to apply and it's a lot easier to sand, and you know, it doesn't leave the amount of pinholes. Fiberglass kind of pinholes a little bit worse. So I always finish out the repair with regular body filler. Then once that's done, you know, basically just prime it, block it out, get it ready for paint, and then you're ready to prime and paint. So that pretty well wraps up the rust repair process.